Somebody has to start. Somebody has to step forward and do what is right because it is right. If nobody starts, then others cannot follow. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Enneagram and Writing. If you missed my video on the Type 1 personality structure, go check that one out first because this will be very, very confusing without it. And also, if you're unfamiliar with the Enneagram, I also have a video breakdown of the Enneagram. It's right over there. Probably not. It's somewhere. You'll be able to find it, I promise. And I go through, break down the system, what it means, how it works, all that good stuff. But today, we are getting into how Enneagram Ones are written and what that looks like when it's done well. Ones in fiction make for some of the most beloved and nuanced characters in storytelling in general, really. And I have a sort of long and not very comprehensive list prepared, so get ready. We have Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird, Kaladin Stormblessed and Zeth from the Stormlight Archive, Thanos and Captain America from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Hermione Granger and Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter, Wax from Wax and Wayne, Princess Leia from Star Wars, Peter Pevensey from Narnia, Inspector Javert from Les Mis by Victor Hugo, Mary Poppins from Mary Poppins, Elsa from Frozen, Ervin Smith from Attack on Titan, Matthias Helvar from Six of Crows, and Katara from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Whew. I'm going to do a long one of these for each number. It's going to be great. Stay tuned. But bearing those names in mind, I want to talk about some of the do's and don'ts when writing ones, and then there are two tropes in particular that I want to talk about specifically. But let's get into it. So the first one is write for motivation, not behavior. And this actually applies to writing and the Enneagram in general. A lot of times when the Enneagram shows up in pop culture, you'll see stereotypes like ones are incurable rule followers, or fours are sloppy puddles of drama and emotion. Fair, but ow. Or sevens are bubbly and happy at every single moment of their waking lives. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. Just don't do it in your writing, in your life. It's no, please. For one thing, it makes for very bland and uninteresting characters, but more importantly, that misses the entire point of the Enneagram. The Enneagram is not about putting people in behavioral boxes. It's about discovering our motivations and what makes us who we are. So when you build your character, go back into their history and figure out why they are what they are. Understand and empathize with where they're coming from. Take Hermione, for example. Yes, she can act like an incurable rule follower, but she also breaks a lot of rules too. Even like unnecessary ones, when she tricks Madame Pomfrey into adjusting her teeth in The Prisoner of Azkaban. If we're just going by behavior sets, that doesn't make sense. But then, who's Hermione? She's the only witch of a family of muggles who has been thrust into this world that's already prejudiced against her success, despite her fierce need to learn and understand and be seen as right. And then we can already see that she feels like she has something to prove, even from the moment she steps into platform 9 3/4. When we know where she's coming from, the little rebellions here and there, they start to make sense. So don't write behaviors based on a stereotype. Write the behaviors based on where the specific character came from and then what they believe that they need. And piggybacking off of that, don't give into the stereotype of ones being the type A perfectionist, I must be orderly and clean and proper, get your filthy free thoughts out of here this instant kind of people. It's a little cliche. It's a little boring. And it's also not reflective of who the Enneagram Type 1s often are. I've known many ones, and quite a few of them are the most incurable rule breakers that I know. Because when you get down to it, it's not about the rules to them. It's about being right. And sometimes this does look like following the rules, but that's only if the one believes that the rules are good and just. Again, this comes back to the individual one's experience. Maybe they grew up in a home where the rules were the only thing that mattered, and that carried on into their adult lives. But many times, especially when ones are more independent and self-sufficient, ones will measure up the rules to their own internal compasses. I was talking with my one family members and friends in preparation for this video, and my brother said something that I think just perfectly sums up the type ones. And he said, they will be the first to follow a rule, but they will also be the first to break a rule. So play around with that. What does your one believe is good? Are they right in that belief? And what does this lead them to do? Then just kind of take that and run with it. The other thing that is often overlooked in ones is their emotions. Again, it's that type A personality kicking in and casting these people as cold and logical, but ones are actually very emotional people. I'm convinced that everyone is given the exact same amount of both thought and feeling, and our personality isn't so much defined by how much we have, but by which one we value. Ones maybe don't place so much value on feelings as more emotional types might, but they feel just as strongly as anyone else. There's just so much more than cold logic inside those ones' heads. There's longing and fear and love and frustration. And I think one of my favorite Enneagram ones in fiction, probably of all time, is Kaladin Stormblessed from the Stormlight Archive. And he's such a deeply emotional character that I actually mistook him for an Enneagram 4 at first. Because Kaladin is just driven by this need to protect people, because he loves people. He has to struggle with guilt and shame and depression, but through it all is his love and belief that people are worth protecting. It's his emotions and his emotional awareness that informs his quest to do the right thing. And I think that makes him a really incredible character and a great representation of the one archetype. And now, on to the tropes. First, I want to talk about the Crusader archetype. I think that really defines a lot of ones is their drive or their goal. Since ones are so goal-oriented, it's easy for this idea to become almost a part of their identity. You'll see this in cases like Hermione Granger or Thanos. What they feel like they need, whether it be good grades or universal genocide, has become a part of who they are. And this is an interesting fictional representation of the type one's inner quest for goodness. As we mentioned earlier, ones aren't attached to the rules, but the inner image of what a good person looks like, which of course leads to the Crusader archetype, because Crusaders are characters who have grown so attached to their visions that it's hard to separate the man from the mission, like Thanos, Atticus Finch, or even Zeth from Stormlight. This archetype plays in very neatly with ones as antagonists. Easily the most airtight and nuanced presentation of a Crusader one is Inspector Javert from Victor Hugo's Les Mis. If you're unfamiliar with the story, Javert is a government official during the June Rebellion of 1832, not the French Revolution, as my friend educated me, and he is completely absorbed in just like law and order and justice. And he also, maybe not surprisingly, is the primary antagonist. What makes his character so interesting is his inability to change. He's locked onto this idea that the wrong must be punished, and he's let that consume him until he becomes this righteous crusader. He's wrapped up in this pursuit of being right, that even when he is presented with grace and the possibility that maybe he himself is in the wrong, he's just completely destroyed by it. And this is very indicative of ones as antagonists. When they're stuck in the shadow of their type, they can become legalistic and vengeful, but they often stay completely, almost desperately convinced of their own righteousness. And that's what makes one antagonist so interesting. That's why we have characters like Thanos, Javert, and even Elsa from Frozen. Because even when they're unhealthy, ones still try to do what they think is right. This brings up ethical and moral questions for your heroes to go up against, like, are we actually in the right here? Or what am I really fighting for? You'll see, like, in Captain America Civil War, it's really hard to tell what the Avengers are about. But throw Thanos into the mix, and it suddenly becomes very, very clear what their goal is, and it just makes for a really interesting and thoughtful story, and it challenges the characters in interesting ways. Another role that one characters often play is that of the group moral compass. Just like Steve Rogers pulls together the Avengers and challenges them to do better, ones are surprisingly good at pulling groups of people together towards a common goal. You see a lot more of this when ones are more healthy and maybe integrating to 7, but even in disintegration, ones challenge the status quo and ask hard questions. My favorite example of this is from Avatar: The Last Airbender in the Season 3 episode titled The Runaway. In the show, Toph, Aang, and Sokka start running a series of scams to earn money, but mostly just because scamming is fun, apparently. I've never done it. This comes from growing up with ones. But Katara, the resident one, just doesn't approve. She pushes back and tries to shut them down, and just is accused of being a stuck-up wet blanket for doing so. But as the episode progresses, we see how she isn't just adhering to the rules for the rules' sake, but she actually has valid safety concerns and wants the group to aspire to something better. And because while ones can often be cast as black and white people, many times they're just striving to be better, to look higher, and to grow. Part of the one's journey to wholeness is often connected with how they interact with other people. And you can see this very frequently in fiction, because ones testing mid to low on the health scale are often loners because they believe that everyone else is just going to mess it up anyway, so then I'll have to go fix it, so might as well just do it myself. But as hard as ones can be on other people, they're so much harder on themselves. And this often means that ones try to go it alone to prove to themselves that they can be worthy and self-sufficient. However, an integral part of the hero's journey for this type is accepting grace. And more often than not, this grace comes from without rather than from within. And I think often in these stories, you'll see the one's routine, orderly life just upset by someone wonderful, someone who makes them face up with who they are and how they may have failed in the past. And my favorite example of this is, again, I'm coming back to it because I love Stormlight Archive. It's Kaladin and Syl. And in their story, Syl helps guide Kaladin through his own fears and failures. And sometimes Kaladin doesn't want to face up with his past because I think deep down he believes that he isn't worthy, that he's irreparably broken in some way. But in having this companion and in walking through it with her, he's able to see and receive grace in spite of his failures rather than erasing or ignoring them. And that's the key there. Writing ones in fiction isn't about putting together a rule-following righteous hero. It's about showing someone who wants to be better, to make the world better. And this can show up in unhealthy ways, but I think it's more incredible and more impactful when we get to see the heart of the one fighting to be better. Not perfect, but better. Because when they find that grace, they can reach out in community and inspire people towards a higher purpose. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope this gave you some insight into how to write and craft Type 1 characters. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video if you thought it was helpful. I'll see you guys soon to talk about Type 2, the Helper.